Have you ever been so focused on reaching the finish line that you completely ignored the road that actually gets you there? See, everybody wants that outcome, whether it's a better marriage, better body, more money, better, stronger career, maybe a stronger faith, better relationship with their kids, whatever that is. But very few people fall in love with the process that it produces or that produces those said things. And social media has done this tricky thing where it's conditioned us to chase the results instead of becoming the type of person that's capable of producing those results repeatedly. See, I heard TD Jakes talk about this one time in a sermon, and he said, man, when you start becoming the person that you need to become, doors start opening for you. It's just like when you go to the grocery store and the hands-free doors, you just get close to it, and then all of a sudden, right, it opens up, and then you're just in, right? You don't have to touch the door, but you're just in the store. Well, the same thing happens when you become the type of person that's necessary to operate at whatever said level. If you want a better relationship, then be the type of man that is warranting that better relationship. If you want a stronger relationship with your kids, then be the type of father that shows up and is humble enough to sit with their kids. And same thing with career, like it doesn't matter whatever it is, but use that same formula. And what's interesting is I saw this happen in real life today. And the thing that it showed me was that good people can be blinded by hitting a certain target, but not necessarily realizing that there needs to be a certain process to follow. So I had some people, the team was like, hey, we got to go through this certain review because we need to take this product live by the end of the year. And you go, great. They're like, well, we need to schedule this review, and we need your help in order to get it on the agenda for this week. And I go, sweet, but you're not ready. And they're like, no, like you don't understand, like we have to hit it. And I'm like, why? Like, slow down. Like you guys just aren't ready. And they're like, no, like we are ready. We're gonna go do it. We've thought through everything. We've talked through everything with everybody. We're good to go. And so I start going through their pitch, and I said, well, how much money is it that you're asking the program to fund? And they're like, well, it's like 1.8 million divided by 5 programs. And I go, that's not how this works. I said, you don't just take a number and do math in real time in there. I said, you have to break it down and say, I am needing from you exactly whatever that dollar amount is. I said, you can't just come in and say like, well, it's about this and we're going to do this and we just need you to approve it. And I said, no, nobody in their right mind is going to just say blindly, like, let's just go do that, whatever that looks like, and then not even ask questions of what that means. Like, you're just going to get a hard, sorry, don't pass go, don't collect $200. This review doesn't pass, and you're not ultimately going to get to the road where you get to. I said, so let's break it down further. I said, okay, so, if it's $400K, what does that $400K get? Is that yearly? Is that one time? I said, and if it's yearly, I said, what is that necessary? Like, what does that get the program? Does that mean that any development stuff that needs to get done, is that on top of it? I said, we have a partner. So how do we cost share with the partner? Are we going to go back and ask the partner to say, hey, we've carried the ball for this far and we want to reconcile? And they're like, no, it's not a big deal. We're just going to go for it. And I go, no, actually it is a big deal, because when you have a partner, you have to be careful of what precedent that you're setting. And you have to think through, okay, well, if we're doing this once, then, and somebody later says, well, we want to go back and back charge. I said, that's not how that works. I said, and doesn't sound like you guys have clear authority to be able to say that we're clearly not doing that, because we have had precedents where we have cost shared that before. They've done things, we had to pay them back for it. And then we've developed things and we had to pay them back for it. That's just how that works. As a true partnership, you want it to be fully bought in. And one of the easiest ways to get people to buy into something is where they have to pay for it. That's why half the time the free things that you see might be super easy, right? On social media, like, drop this comment and get my free thing. That's true, but you're never going to follow through with it because you don't value it, because we don't value the things. We don't put a time constraint on things that are offered free. Now, if you have to pay for it, just like a personal trainer, there's a gym that's open all the time. 24/7. You could go and do push-ups and sit-ups and everything else for free. But most people don't do that. But 90%, right, rough statistic, is people who pay for a personal trainer show up. Now you'll have 10% of people that just pay for things that just they don't even care about. That's fine. But for the vast majority is whenever you spend the money on something that says, hey, this is important to me, and I'm going to show up and do it. It's the same thing with a partner, right? To build buy-in, you want them to be bought in so that you're just not pushing something that they're going along with, and then they're looking for any reason to slow you down and say, I don't really want to go do it, right? Other paradigms of a partnership. So we go through and I say, listen, there's a lot of these questions that I just came up with in 5 to 10 minutes that I would expect that audience to fire back. And if we don't have that clearly documented and showed, you're not going to pass that review, and you're not going to hit your timeline. You're not going to be able to go do all this stuff. And they're like, oh man, there's all these processes and all this other stuff that's just slowing us down. And I go, but you're looking at it from, you just want to go do what you want to go do. And you're frustrated when you have to go through the necessary steps. I said, but put yourself in the shoes of the people who has to make the funding approval. Am I going to go spend that? I said, sooner or later, someone's going to ask him, hey, why did you go spend this money? What is it going to get us? Like, those are just natural questions. And he can't say, well, I don't know. I told the team, sure, go for it, run with it. And however much money you spend, if it's over, great. If it's under, great. Are we going to get any results for it? Like, that's not how business works. So it was a really interesting perspective. And the people were good people. Like, they were, really strong, good characters and everything. It's just, they just got blinded by the goal line. And they said, I don't really care about the process, but I just want to go after that said goal. Well, but when you get blinded by that, what you end up doing is you actually sacrifice the overall timeline anyway. Like, the amount of times that we've had to fight about what material is prepared. And like, this isn't the first necessary instance. Like, this has been probably 3 or 4 different types of conversations. But every time that you revisit it, you're just extending the timeline, right? What you resist persists. So if you're continuously resisting going and doing the work and becoming, right, whatever that is, like the presentation or the discipline or the rigor or the diet, right? Whatever that is to become that person, then you're just extending out that timeline. So, lesson 1 is deadlines don't replace readiness. A calendar cannot compensate for poor preparedness. Sometimes delaying it a week actually saves a month. Just like if you were to go through this review, right, what I told the team, and I said, and you go through the review and you get a whole bunch more action items, and you didn't close the action items from the previous review because you kind of closed it, but not really, you're just going to piss a whole bunch of more people off. And now your topic will be held with more scrutiny because they're like, if they didn't do this right, then how do we know that they actually did all the closure of all the action items that we wanted before? And that's another interesting bias that I've come upon is if you do a good job and you address everything and you're clear and you're thoughtful and you are prepared, people will then start to recognize you as you know what you're doing. So certainly they'll give you the benefit of the doubt, right? It's just like your buddy, a good buddy that you trust a lot. You would take it, you'd give your car keys and you wouldn't actually ask all the questions afterwards. Like, did you hit anything? Like, did you do the speed limit, right? Did you drive it like you stole it or did you take care of it? You wouldn't have to ask those questions because you just know and you have built that trust. I said, but the opposite is also true. If you don't do a great job, you fumble your way through a review, that tells the audience you don't really know how to go do. Like, if you can't prepare this, then how are you going to go influence the rest of the organization and the other partners and be able to actually execute said timeline that you had? It starts eroding that trust. And then what erosion of trust starts to turn into is more micromanaging. Well, certainly if he can't handle this or he or she can't handle this right, well, then I have to certainly follow up and make sure, did they do all the other things right? Because I don't know. I mean, now I need to make sure that you're doing that right, and then this right, and then that right. And so recognizing also, like, this is another, gift that we all have is putting ourselves in other people's shoes. What I had said to the folks today, I said, if you were the one in charge of the money and leadership or the boss or somebody else, just your, whoever, auditors. I mean, shoot, for even that matter, like whether it has to be within your own leadership chain or not, but like auditors came in and started asking you questions. Could you defend and say, yeah, I honestly spent that money judiciously? Or did I just willy-nilly throw it around? And honestly, I don't even know where the money went. Auditors not going to listen to that. Like, all the accountants all of a sudden just like grip their chairs, right? Like, oh my gosh, he said what? Just spending money and couldn't trace it down? But when you do that, like, you're building your personal brand. All right, you can bring this back through the marketing. Like, that's speaking to your personal brand. Do you want your personal brand to be somebody who fumbles their way through and doesn't have things prepared and has to have action upon action upon action and review upon review in order to make sure you got things done correctly? Or do you want to do the due diligence, understand what the process takes, get as much pre-review content as you can so that when you go through said reviews, now all of a sudden it's like, bam, nailed it. He got everything. He answered all the questions. He had clear and concise. He addressed questions that I was going to ask, but he addressed it before I could even have the opportunity to ask it. That's a huge credibility, right? I mean, think to the time when you had a conversation with somebody and they're telling a story, and every time that you're like, well, hold on, and you couldn't even get the question out because they addressed it. It's like, I don't know, but then you would think this, but then that's where I did this. And you're a lot more engaged in that person because you realize they're thinking in a similar way and they've already addressed all those things. So you build that trust up. So again, personal brand, are you building that up or are you eroding it? And in every interaction, sadly, like we're doing that, whether we consciously are realizing that or not. The people we talk to, we either love talking to them and want to talk to them more and more frequently, or we don't and we talk to them less frequently. And sometimes life gets busy and we just don't talk to anybody, right? That happens. But there is this, you lean more into people that you have a more like know, like, and trust factor, and people that you don't have a know, like, and trust factor, you tend to drift away from. That's just human nature. So, in general, I think that message kind of came across, but I thought it would be a perfect podcast episode because it's a real life example that I'm sure we've all experienced. I know I have. I mean, obviously I experienced it today, but, and there's times in my own life where I get blinded by a deadline that I set for myself and realize I didn't put in the work. I was doing what I call like the glory work, but I wasn't ready to go do the sweat work, right? The grunt work. You either do glory work in anything in life. You will always have glory work, then grunt work, and then glory work. And that's what I've noticed when I rebuild, anything around the farm, do anything at work. It's like you have the kickoff and you get all this momentum and everything's exciting. Like working out is really exciting because there's new things. It's this. I feel good. I feel the pump. So that's like the glory work. Well, then all of a sudden, like a week in, now all of a sudden training sucks because you're sore because you've worked out 3 times. Now you have 3 different areas that are sore, and then you still have to show up and do that workout. Well, that's the grunt work. You got to continue to keep doing it. But then if you're doing all this for a race, like, I've got a half marathon coming up in October. So it's like towards the end and or the race. Well, that's all glory work because you're running the race, but you could only run that race, right? I could only run that race if I've done my pre-work, if I've done all the grunt work. But I never would have gotten to the grunt work unless I had the glory work, which kicked me off. So that's all very true. When you get a new project, right? You can do this in anything. Get a new project, super excited, that's the glory work. Have to go through, crunch the numbers, build a business case, present the business case, get a whole bunch of stones thrown at it. You're trying to defend the business case. That's the grunt work. Then all of a sudden, when it actually goes through and you start delivering for your customers and you start seeing the real world impact, like that's the glory work. So everything follows that cycle. It's just we have to be aware of, hey, you know what? And honestly, like calling it out for me has been super helpful. Like honestly, like I just got this grunt work. I get it. It's grunt work. It sucks right now, but I'm just going to do it because I know on the other side of this, there's going to be the glory work. So lesson 1 was deadlines don't replace readiness. Okay. Lesson 2, listen to people who've already walked the path. Like this isn't about ego. It's not, it's just honestly straight wisdom. Every field, right? We live in a world, and I joke with this with the companies, right? It's like in a company, there's always somebody that knows how to get whatever it is that you're trying to get done. There's somebody at that company that knows how to do it. You just have to find them. And in a large corporation, it might take a lot of networking and trying to set up all these meetings to figure out who's the right person that can actually get you to, this is the process, this is what you have to go do these things, and you're golden. Now, in the personal world, when it's outside of a corporation, that might look like a coach, that might look like a pastor, a mentor, financial advisor, a marriage counselor, a physical trainer. But what I've learned over life, and in my early 20s, I definitely wasn't this way, was I was like, screw this, I'm going to go do it all myself. I'm going to figure it all out on my own, and I'm just going to go do it. Well, that just leads to burnout. But as I've matured into my 30s, I've now realized, like, what is it that I'm missing? Who is it that I'm missing? Who do I need in my life to be able to learn those things, to be able to then go build whatever it is that I'm trying to go build? With homesteading, it was relying and finding through family, friends, people who have grown food sustainably for years, learning from mom and dad who have grown a garden since I was a kid, talking to Amber's family who has preserved, like they have water bath can, pressure can, dehydrated, all the things. Freeze drying, that was like a new thing. So we actually kind of paved the way. But even then, we went and found forums and found people who have done freeze drying before and who have found, hey, if you're doing blueberries, these are the things you got to go do. If you want to go do meats, this is what you got to watch out for and go do. Like you had to learn from somebody else. And that kind of gets me to, we have to be open. We may not always, we have an end game in mind, but inherently there's an expectation that I think we also have, which is we know what the path looks like. And we're crushed every time that the path doesn't follow the same path or trajectory that we think it does, because we think that's the only path to get there, when in reality, there's a million different paths in order to get to the same result. So we have to be open, humble enough and open to say, what am I missing? What else do I need to take into consideration? So instead of saying, how fast can I get there? What is it that I'm missing? What other skill set do I need to learn? Who do I need to incorporate? Who do I need to learn from? Like, these are all questions that can help you get to your end goal a lot faster. Lesson 3, humility accelerates progress. Like, this probably could be summed up in its own thing, which is just humble pie is served daily. And I say that like at least once a day. Humble pie gets served daily. We all get a piece. There's nobody that's immune from it. Nobody has ever gone through life not eating a piece of humble pie. Just doesn't happen. And, pride will show up as, well, I already know. But humility will say, okay, teach me what I need to learn. And one of the fastest ways to compress decades into days is from learning from somebody else's experience. Like, that's why Tony Robbins is so successful, because he went out and he found all the great mentors and he learned how to condense time, and he sold that and said, hey, you can go do it by your own, and it'll take you 5 to 10 years. Or if you do what I have already done and condense that down into a weekend or 6 weeks, you can have the same results. So do you want to take a decade, or do you want to go get this done in 6 weeks? You choose. And how much money do you want to spend at it? And it was interesting because, again, today, and this isn't even just a today thing, but I've heard people where they will just die on that hill that says, no, I already know. I know what I got to go do. And one of the questions I always hated, because somebody did this to me. This is the only way I know. Because I was once that person, like, no, I got this all figured out. I got these plans. I got these things. I'm doing these things. And he said, all right, well, if you already know, then why haven't you done it yet? Why didn't you get that through the review? Why isn't that product out there? If you already know how to go do it, why don't you go do it? And, it's like you have a big gulp, like, oh, okay, fine, right? That's pride that's smacking you right upside the face, the humble pie that gets served. But what that also teaches you and allows you to do is to realize, hey, there's something I can learn here. And one cool thing, like life lesson that I've learned throughout all of my life, is that everybody is a teacher and a student. You can teach something to everybody in the world. And also you can learn from everybody in the world. And when you look at that way, then when you're saying, okay, if I want to get to this end game or this goal, then who is it that I need to learn from along the way in order to get there? Okay. So the process can change you. We think we're chasing that destination, and God is usually the destination that transforms us. If He simply handed us everything immediately, then we become the wrong men holding the right blessing. It was funny. I think Alex Hormozy was talking about this, and he said, if you were to design a human, what would you do in order to teach them strength? Would you give them an easy life, or would you give them opportunities in order to show strength? If you wanted to teach them wisdom, would you just give it to them? Or would you give them scenarios in order to go apply? Hard scenarios, easy to fall down rabbit holes, opportunities where you can practice that wisdom. Which one would it be? And I think that's very valuable. I think it's very insightful, because for each of us that is trying to become the next version of ourselves, there's something that we have to learn. And there's also something that we have to let go. That's the process of evolution. Is in order to get the next version, just like every software role, right? On the iPhone, for instance, they always have to they have to uninstall the old one, and then they have to install the new one. And the same thing happens for us, except less dramatic. We have to give up certain aspects of our old self, right? We're keeping like 99%, and we're just replacing onesie twosie type things. And then we're gaining new wisdom and insight that's helping us to become that better version. Okay. Now, the other thing that I wanted to show or to talk through was tying it back to the Bible, because there's actually 2 verses that I think ties us well. The first one comes from Proverbs, which I love Proverbs, all of Proverbs, just because it's great wisdom that can be applied everywhere. Like if you've never read the Bible and you just read Proverbs, you would get so much value from it. But Proverbs 15:22 says, plans go for lack of advice, many advisors bring success, which is everything of what we've talked about, right? This fits exactly into every example and every story that I've had, right? The team had a plan and they didn't bring in as many advisors to build advocacies in order to have a successful review. They were just trying to go on the lack of advice that they had. The other one comes from Proverbs 19:20, which is get all the advice and instructions you can so you will be wise the rest of your life. Now, this one I think feeds right into like the self-help world, right? The self-improvement, because that's exactly what that is. Now, there's also the other side of it, which is if you do it, are you doing it and applying it? Or are you just learning for the sake of learning, but you're not really applying any of it? You're still stuck in the implementation phase, the accountability phase. Like that's the big lesson there. So side tangent that's something to watch out for with all the advice is when you start going to get advice after advice after advice. If you're reading and getting all this advice, but you're not putting it into practicality, then all you're doing is just becoming a revolving door of knowledge, which can still be helpful, but you might not get the life that you ultimately wanted because you're not doing the things that you already know is true. So just a practical thing. So honestly, like let's wrap this up. Where are you trying to force progress instead of preparing for success? Is it your marriage? Is it your faith? Is it your career? Maybe health, finances? And then who has already accomplished what you're trying to do? Have you actually asked them for guidance? That's hard. That's probably one of the hardest things is to just humbly say, I don't have all the answers and I'm willing to learn. Like I remember when I first started in the aerospace industry 15 years ago, it was, I tried to do things and failed miserably and realized I needed to go ask guidance from other people. I mean, even after like the first however many years, when I started thinking about what do I want my career to look like, I didn't know because I didn't even know what the world possible was. Like the only thing I knew was like, well, I guess I could be CEO. Like that's a role. But I didn't really think about like what would it have taken in order to go get that? What skill sets do I need? What are the competencies? Am I good at that? Am I not good at that? How do I go practice small and how do I go learn and build? So then what I got in the habit of, and some people had given me this advice where they said, look at whatever role that you're trying to get to, and then what are you going to do the role after? And if you start to think in 2 and 3 roles ahead, then you get to start to say, well, if I really want, because we can always lie to ourselves, right? We can always say, well, I can always do my boss's job. For sure. I do it half the time now anyway. And we blur the lines and we don't necessarily think through what are the things, the competencies that I needed to establish and prove in order to go get that role. We just are like, well, I'm doing it now. Like, why would I not be considered for that? And there might be some glaring reasons, but you can find some details in the contrast. So if you say, hey, okay, my boss's boss or my boss's boss's boss, what are the things that I need to do in order to think that way? Well, it might be more strategic thinking. It might be better articulation. It might be brevity. You don't know until you really start looking at and then getting feedback from everybody to then say, these are the areas and these are the skill sets that I need to work on. And then you'll get to your outcome. So are you willing to actually ask for guidance? Or are you trying to reinvent the wheel every time? Like, again, as an engineer, I always try to reinvent the wheel, but I always have to catch myself and realize, hey, this wheel's been made. I don't have to go figure it out. There's somebody on YouTube that's figured out how to go build the tomato cages that I need. And there's somebody that's already figured out how to go maximize cucumbers, right? How do I grow more cucumbers? How do I go sustainably grow onions? Like people have done all of it. All you got to do is just tap into who has done it, learn from them, and then go execute. So I don't want this we're trying to keep the process or trying to keep the episodes a little shorter so that way it keeps it digestible for like a car ride for you. So one thing that I want to close with is trust the process because you trust the one who designed it. Like if you think about how God has showed up for us and shown us that if we do the process and we get the said results, all we have to do is just go through that process. But that process means that I need to seek advice. That process means that I need to identify and self-reflect. That process means I need to constantly be evolving myself as a man so that I become an even better version of myself the next day than I was today. And those little bit of micro improvements, that constant, consistent growth, small steps can add up to giant, mileage in the macro scheme of things. So with that, keep moving forward. And one thing that I would ask is, again, if this episode resonated with you, if you liked it, if you're still here, thank you for listening to the end. I really appreciate that. And then number 2 is if I could ask for a favor, which is, could you go leave a comment or a review on wherever you listen to your podcast? It would help me. It would help grow the show. And I just very much value your feedback. Until next time, keep moving forward.